The Love Affair event is on at Whole Foods Market with deals on delicious desires through February 14th. The floral department's in full bloom, so look for savings on double dozen bunches of roses. In the meat and seafood departments, save on animal welfare certified New York strip steaks and sustainable wild-caught lobster tails to make the night sizzle. Gifts from the wellness and beauty department are always a nice touch. And you have to grab those chocolate-dipped strawberries. Make Whole Foods Market your Valentine's Day destination.
Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, now streaming only on Netflix.
I'd like to buy the world a home and furnish it with love. Grow apple trees and honey bees and snow white turtle doves.
Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Before My Time. I am your host, Gelsey Laurie. We are joined, as always, by our co-host, producer, and, let's face it, best friend, Matt Kelly, and we are talking about the history of Coca-Cola. Company and the real the world in perfect harmony, and I'd like to buy the world a Coke and keep it company.
We're here to entertain you. We'll sing your songs for good times, the best times. You can't go wrong. We'll two-step, a new step. It won't be long. When the Dixielanders are playing, soon you'll be swaying. So come on, sing along.
All right, Gelsey, since the History of Wine episode was such a raging success, we needed to dive into some of the more drinks, and you've offered a couple drinks that you've learned the history of. And I said, which one do you feel like you've got to just tell us the exciting tale? And you said, oh, Coca-Cola for sure. So
Yeah.
here we are, the history of Coca-Cola, not to be confused with the history of Coke.
No,
or
this
maybe.
No, kind of. No, this does not take place in Cartagena, Colombia with a cartel. That is not where the location of the story starts. But yeah, we're going to go way, way back, Matt, to the 1880s. Ooh, that's not too far back. We've gone further. Anyway, so in the 1880s, there was a huge backlash at doctors and kind of the medical field at that point, and there was a huge wave of home remedies being sold and kind of used for medical ailments and medication instead of actual medication. And there was no, at that time, so we got a lot of entrepreneurs, deceitful entrepreneurs who are creating potions and elixirs and claiming they have a wide variety of medical benefits, which a lot of these elixirs, most of them had dangerous and ineffective concoctions. So they're actually kind of like harmful to us and whatnot, but there's no regulations at this time, so anything can be bottled and sold, and any claims can be made that it's going to fix your headache, it's going to fix your stomach pain. Some of them were crazy claims, like if you drink this every day, within 3 days, if you're on crutches, like you will never use that again, your limps will go away, you're like just absurd whatever. So one of these drinks was called Vin Mariani, and it basically was a concoction of wine and cocaine, and it claimed that it could cure any sickness, which if you consume, and they said, but you have to consume 3 glasses a day. So if you're consuming wine and cocaine throughout the day, daily, every day, you're probably going to just feel better because it's just masking, like you're just buzzed and on coke. So yeah, you're like, I feel great. Fuck yeah. So actually we should go back to that. Why? I don't understand why we're not doing that now. Like I was sick all day yesterday on the couch. I think if I did a line of coke and had some wine, I might have been
chugged a bottle of wine, you'd be
I think
flying.
I'd be like, I could go out and do everything. And that would probably be a bad idea. That sounds like the last thing I want to do when I'm sick. I just want to make a clear statement before we start. Not that if you've done coke, go for it, live your life. I never have. I will joke that I have a lot, and it sounds like I'm a cokehead, but sometimes I listen to these, I'm like, I sound like I do this shit all the time. And I was like, I'm too hyper for it. I think if I did a line of Coke, I would explode, or I would be like that scene in Who Framed Roger Rabbit when Roger takes a shot of whiskey and he's like, ah! Like that would be me on Coke. Like, so I'm not allowed. Anyways, okay. So Coke and wine, back to that. So at the time there was a chemist named John Pemberton, and he was a huge fan of this drink. He was a war veteran and was severely injured in battle. So he's dealing with a lot of pain in his life. And actually, when he was in the hospital with his initial injuries and whatnot, he got highly hooked to morphine and had a serious morphine addiction. So he discovers Vin Mariani and gets hooked on that and is like, it's helping me off my morphine and it works. And of course, again, it made him feel better because it's wine and Coke. And it just kind of like replaced the morphine, even though morphine's a lot stronger, whatever. Felt better, duh. So after having this, he's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to create my own version. I'm going to make my own drink of this. And he does. In 1884, he creates a rip-off version of this called French wine Coca. And it basically is the same thing. It's wine and Coke, but has a couple other ingredients. This is what is the original Coca-Cola. So this becomes that. No, we hit a problem. This is 1884. He creates it. About 85, he's distributing it. Still as a medical drink. 1886, Prohibition hits. So, yeah, big uh-oh. So Pemberton has to remove the wine, and at that time he replaces it with carbonated water, which left a really bitter taste. Now it's not good. So he adds a high amount of sugar. Ding, ding, ding. And he needed a new name because the original name said French wine in it. And Pemberton's bookkeeper, Frank Robinson, is the one who came up with the name Coca-Cola. Now, the company later says that name means nothing. Like, if you look on their website, they're like, it's just a catchy name. It sounds great. Mm-hmm, yeah.
Yeah.
The cola comes from the cola nut, which contained caffeine, and coca comes from the coca leaf, which was cocaine. So we get Coca-Cola. And yeah, I love that they deny so much, and it's great. I'm like, but by 1929, they do remove the cocaine. So we got a couple good decades of hyped up Coca-Cola, but they eventually do remove the cocaine. But there's still not very many people buying it, right? So we're kind of it's still being sold on a medical aspect, and early ads described it as harmless, and it's a wonderful brain tonic that relieves headaches and upset stomachs is how they were trying to sell it. But they were really slow because there's so many drinks like this on the market for these medical elements and whatnot. And so it's just like their competition they were just a nobody. John Pemberton dies in 1888, but before he dies, he sells Coke for $2,300 to a man named Asa Candler. And so Pemberton does die. It's kind of sad. He never actually lives to see his drink become anything, and doesn't even know that it's going to become like the Coke company that we know today. I mean, duh, he was going to be dead anyways. But anyway, so Candler buys all the shares that other people have for full control of this company. But there later becomes an investigation that shows there's a lot of forged signatures and not all the shares were bought. But he had the early records of the company burned, most likely to hide his tracks. So we're already getting a mwahaha kind of a guy.
Yeah, there's already over. Some like that's like a. I feel like we're early into the story of Coca-Cola. And if someone was making a movie about the history of Coca-Cola, we've just told one story that would be a film all in itself.
Oh,
of like
1,000%.
The way the man who stole Coca-Cola or whatever.
Exactly. And like Asa Candler already is coming in with like a good like rubbing hands together, twirly mustache, occasionally give it a little pinch kind of a guy. He didn't look like that, but I'm imagining very like, Coca-Cola's mine. He definitely tied up
like
a girl.
Dudley. Not Snidely Whiplash.
Yeah, he like definitely has tied up a damsel and put her on a train track. Like that's the kind of guy that I'm just like, nope, that's who he is in my brain. So he does something actually though that's quite genius, and this is what makes the company. He doesn't really focus on the product, he focuses on advertising. And he does something that was never done before. He fills the town with billboards, placards. He literally puts Coke everywhere. If there's a barn, they paint it on. If there's signs, like they just put all of their money into advertising. And it was a huge success. He does another really smart move where he contacts all the pharmacies and gets a list of their top customers and sends them all coupons for a free Coke. So he's like, if we can get them to try the product, they'll be forever customers, but also Coke has things in it that are addictive.
Yeah.
AE at this time, there's still cocaine in it, but then also caffeine, we all know, is highly addictive, and I'm one of the consumers there. I need my fix. I literally wake up with headaches, and I'm like, oh no, I have a headache, and I'm like, oh no, I just need my coffee. Great.
Yeah.
Addiction.
I mean, 100%. I've cut out soda, and I've never had coffee, but even cutting out soda,
You're so weird.
I have a chai tea every single day because it's like the one intake of sugar that I can get each day.
I cut out soda when I was really young. My sister and I were going through a phase where we were getting cavities left and right. Like every time we went to the dentist, it was multiple, and we were just like, we had one dentist that was like, honestly, stop drinking soda. He's like, if you stop drinking soda, I guarantee you won't have a cavity. And we were so sick of getting fillings. We were like, fine, no more soda. And we just like went cold turkey as kids, cut out soda, and he was right. Like the next time we went back, we had no cavities, and we were like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And so ever since that point, like now
it's also
I'll
a great
have,
way to drop weight. If you're like trying to lose weight and you drink a lot of soda,
even
it's the same thing with
diet.
beer. Like, yeah, you don't have to do any diet. Just like drop the soda out for like a month or so, and you will literally suddenly drop like 10, 15 pounds.
Well, I do that.
Like,
I've
easy.
helped a few friends on tours kind of help. Like I'm not really into the idea of dieting per se. I'm more like just have a healthy lifestyle and balance and all that, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I do tell, like, I had a friend that she was like, can you help me this, that? And her diet was like insanely southern fried food, liter of soda, all this. And I was like, honestly, like I just had her focus on not drinking calories. I was like, don't change your diet, but just be conscious of everything you're consuming drink wise with sugar and that. And she did, and like she lost weight immediately. I was like, yep, see?
It's
Anyways,
insane.
this is going into like a diet thing.
Which is not what this show's about. So tell me
No!
about the
Eat what you
cocaine
want.
soda
Live
water.
Your life. Okay, sugar soda water. So yeah, so they then moved their marketing. So they're still being sold as a medical drink, and it's kind of like, meh, it's, doing good. The advertising's working, but they moved their marketing from medical to a tasty, relaxing drink anyone could enjoy. So now they're just like, screw it. What if we just made this that it's accessible to anyone, and it's just a yummy time drink? And the sales grew rapidly, like crazy. Now I'm thinking, if I'm walking around town and one day you see like Coca-Cola, ease your stomach, and then like the next day they're like, fuck it, just drink it for funsies, I'd be like, wait a minute, wasn't this just like a medicine a second ago? But it totally worked, and they kept dumping money into advertisement, which to this day has not changed. I mean, you can't go 10 minutes in your day without seeing Coca-Cola somewhere. But they did something else. They started paying movie stars and athletes for endorsements as well, which was a huge, and this is still, early 1900s, then getting into like the talkies, but just, it's not like what we know today going, oh yeah, of course, athletes are wearing all this shit all the time and this, that. It hadn't been really done as much before. And a lot of these marketing strategies that we go, oh yeah, you put it everywhere. They even ran tests to see, like, surveys where the biggest foot traffic was, and where like traffic at certain times of day, and that's where they put their advertisement in. Like, they were doing all this research that no one had ever done before. So again, today it sounds like it's a commonplace, and these are all strategies that, like, if you go to business marketing school or a degree in that, these are all things you're going to learn and be like, of course, that's a basic, but they are the ones that pioneered it all. So that, they do have that huge weight on it. They even do things, I'm going to jump forward a teensy bit into the timeline, into kind of the 30s, when they heavily add Santa Claus into their...
I was literally just about to ask you, isn't there something... There's something huge with Coke and Santa Claus,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think I've heard... So what I feel like I've heard, and then correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like Coca-Cola is almost directly responsible for Santa Claus as we currently know him. Like, their design of Santa Claus is the Santa Claus that we all now like believe comes down our chimney every
he popularized
December 24th.
Yeah, exactly. They didn't create that look. It was, pulled from other images, but before the 1930s, the image of Santa Claus varied widely, with different artists and illustrations depicting him in very different ways. However, in 1931, Coca-Cola commissioned Haddon Sundblom, a commercial artist, to create a series of Christmas adverts featuring Santa Claus. And his depiction of Santa Claus was what we know today, a jolly, routed, white-bearded man in a red suit, and that became kind of the standard image of how we see Santa Claus today. It's like... you can't say that, it had been created that kind of general image before, but again, it was mixed in. I mean, if you look at really old Christmas decorations or adverts or drawings from late 1800s, early 1900s, you will see Santa Clauses that are thin or have a different outfit, kind of more of a dress or a nomad. It does vary a lot, but this really brought in the honed in image of Santa Claus we know today. Now, one of the biggest reasons they do this is to start marketing children and start associating Christmas and Santa Claus with Coca-Cola, which is a brilliant move, Coke. Initially, though, kind of going back a little then before the 30s, they were mostly sold, around the same time, mostly sold in soda fountains. So they would only distribute the syrup, and it saves tons of money because all they have to do, the packaging and distribution of just syrup is not that expensive. And then the soda fountains would then mix it with the carbonated water they have, and they could sell it that way. Two lawyers come along, Benjamin and Joseph. They have the idea to bottle it. Now, Asa Candler thinks that's a dumb idea. He's like, why? This is doing great, selling syrup. Why would we take that risk? He thinks it's a flop. So they agree to take on all the cost and all the risk themselves. And so Candler agrees and writes up a contract. But because he doesn't think it's a huge success, he does not put a lot of thought and time into this contract. And he agrees and grants them all bottling rights for a fee of $1. And because there's no thought to the contract, there was no time frame. There's no mention of if the price of materials to make the syrup goes up, then the cost of this bottling would go up for him. None of that was put in. So obviously bottling as we know it is huge. It's a huge success, which originally Candler thought, well, if it's a flop, I didn't lose much. I'm only doing the $1 thing and I didn't put any money into it, or he's getting paid $1. But if it's a success, then great. That's more products that I have to sell my syrup to, and it will be huge for me. But again, so as time goes on, they don't have the bottling rights. If the cost of syrup does go up, now it's like, oh shit, he's distributing and selling it for like a crazy price, blah, blah, blah. Well, that leads to multiple lawsuits in the future between Coke and the bottlers. And the next couple of decades, Coke spends millions of dollars trying to buy back slowly the bottle rights, which is insane. But so eventually they get it. And just every year they just put more money into marketing. Their sales are growing. They're getting more money and they just put it back into marketing, and it always pays off. It is a huge return. So they're doing good. In enters World War II. So during World War II, and I know I've talked about this before in other episodes, but there's a lot of rationing going on for wartime efforts and financial reasons, and sugar was one of those. So sugar was highly rationed, and most companies had to cut sugar from their products. It put companies under, blah, blah, blah. Coke goes to the government and argues that they should be exempt because Coke was an essential wartime product, and the government approved. They're like, yes. Obviously, they were all big Coca-Cola drinkers. They're like, don't fucking take away our Coke. So Coca-Cola, but they also spent a lot of money lobbying the government. So there's already this like weird relationship between Coca-Cola and the government. And so they're like, give us this. And they're like, sure, because they're giving each other money and like jacking each other off, basically. Let's be real. And they argue that it would keep up the morale and provide energy boost for soldiers, which isn't wrong. I mean, it has caffeine. They're literally like, let us ship over caffeine to the soldiers. But the soldiers did love it. And they were like, oh, this is a taste of home and all that. But the Coke president at the time promised every man in uniform would get a bottle for 5 cents wherever they were. Now, initially, this would be a huge loss for the company because they're underselling their product. But what it did in return was, again, boost up sales. It was a huge genius marketing move that now it creates a strong connection between war and the war effort and Coke, and how they're now playing this whole patriotic, we're for the boys, and the public goes nuts. They love it. And Coke.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, whether they're losing a loss on the actual soldiers, like, case in point, there is a place not by my house that I order food from pretty regularly, and I would have ordered food from them regardless because their food is quite good. But in the last couple months, I found out that during the pandemic, they kept a running list of every person who was furloughed in our town, and at the end of the day, they would take whatever leftovers they had and would drive around for hours delivering free meals to every family that was furloughed. And like finding that out makes me just go like, oh, well, now they're like my number one. If I'm going to order out, that's the type of business I want to support.
Yeah.
So like Coca-Cola, it makes sense. You're taking a little bit of a loss on the people who are coming back from war, but you're doing such a great PR move that everyone feels better about themselves purchasing a Coca-Cola.
Yeah, and the
store.
sales. Yeah, it was a good move. I was like, damn, they're smart. They're like, we're going to lobby the government and get what we need and do all this. Well, listen, it gets even smarter. So they start running new wartime ads. It's always men in uniforms holding the Coke bottles, and it just really became this image and a huge part of the war. And they made a deal with the government to get money to help set up plants overseas so that they could spread American influence and boost soldier morale. And of course, the government's like, fuck yeah, let's go. So initially, taxpayers are helping fund Coke's global expansion. So they used this as their opportunity to globally expand, but again, on the government's dollar, which is the people's dollar, and we're in war. So there were 64 bottling plants set up around the world, again, mostly funded by the government. And the techs who installed the cola plants were deemed just as vital as the people who were fixing tanks and planes during the war. So they really put a lot of emphasis on, like, this is just as important, which, sure.
Yeah, exactly. Right on.
Sure. And then, of course, the military became the Coke sales force. They're all over the world. The drinks were shared with locals. The soldiers were so thankful for the taste of home that they become the drink's biggest advocates. So you have the number one fan of the drink worldwide as the drink is becoming worldwide. It's like this, the war is literally what boosted Coke to a global organization and reaching the world. Fun fact, only 2 countries today don't sell Coke. Can you guess what they are?
2 countries that don't sell Coke. All right. I'm going to guess England.
Nope.
Okay.
Think more American. Who doesn't want to sell American products?
Oh, gotcha. Japan?
No, Japan loves us.
That's
okay,
true. I'm
we're
terrible
done with
at
this.
Just tell me.
Cuba and North Korea.
See, I wouldn't have. I was going to go with Australia. You know what? You're giving me those hints, and I'm just thinking of I'm not sure how much clickbaity shit your parents send you, but my parents are constantly sending me these things. It's like 10 American products that aren't sold anywhere else in the United States because of outside of the United States because of health concerns. So I'm like, well,
that would make sense.
Who would be health conscious about we cannot bring in sugary substances like that?
And are you kidding me? England, all of my friends from the UK are the biggest Coke consumers. There was this one girl, or my friend Lauren, we did a contract together, but when we lived in an apartment together during a rehearsal period, she would literally just have a liter of Coke and drink it like it's her small bottle. And I swear she drank. She also was the tiniest person I've ever seen. And I'm like, how are you?
Sorry.
How?
You did this? I thought you meant that she drank it with her pinky out
properly.
Yeah,
she's very classy. No, she's itty bitty, was just the thinnest, tiniest person and could just down Coke. All my friends are like, oh, just gonna grab a quick Coke. It's my terrible impression of all my friends.
Beautiful. I'm sure we won't lose any listeners in the UK from that impression.
Do we have listeners in the UK? Hey, if you're in the UK and you're listening to this, let me know. Write somewhere and be like, it's me. And then be like, you fucking suck. All right. I won't do that again. So we think, patriotic, all American. Everyone's like, woohoo, Coca-Cola. Wrong. They're just in for the money because they were also supplying Nazi Germany with Coke. It was highly distributed at Hitler Youth rallies and advertised on Nazi educational pamphlets. And they kind of changed their angle there. They obviously weren't playing the all-American woohoo. They highly dissociated from patriotism, America, all that, to then sell in Nazi Germany. And it did quite well there. But as the war progressed, there were restrictions on imported goods, especially from America, and they cut off the supply. So Max Keith, who was the head of the German bottling operations for Coca-Cola, reached out to local chemists to create a new drink similar to Coke using their own resources, which was generally made from leftover scraps of other food produce. And thus is the birth of Fanta.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking you were going to say something else, but all right, let's continue with Fanta.
Fanta gets born, and it's a huge hit in Nazi Germany. It's there's tons of, you can look up Fanta adverts with Nazi shit, and it's all there. All of that profit after the war goes back to Coca-Cola's headquarters because that's who started it. Max is given a huge promotion in the company, and by 1955, Coke is selling Fanta in many different countries. So they're like, cool, works for us. So they with open arms, opened their Nazi soda and start selling it. this is the beginning of many. I kind of generally stop the heavy. I'm going to go into a little competition here on info, but that's where like the vast of my main research of like the start of it, because then we get into like corporate shit into like the 80s and the 90s, and I just felt like it was too close to my time. But I will say that as we continue, there's things that they do or did, I think they still do it, where there was one teacher at a school who was like, we need to look at our children's health, like what we're giving them at the schools. We should offer healthier drinks like fruit juices, this, that. And the school basically was like, that's not possible. We can't. She's like, why not? And she learned her horror that Coca-Cola was paying the school and was doing this with tons of schools. I think they gave them like $3,000 to only sell Coca-Cola products in school. And the schools were at a really low funding era at that point, and they were like, we're desperate. We can't say no. And they were doing that to try to hook kids, which there's a lot of things that like obviously now it's shown there's laws that you can't directly market to kids, even though you can because all the toy commercials, like hello. But there's certain things that they've like manipulated around, like by doing this and trying to sell it to kids at a young age behind. Like it's kind of sleazy, but anyway, so they're hooking up a younger generation. It's kind of brilliant because they're going to get addicted because you're giving children caffeine at a very young age, which that always blows me away that like all these kids that do drink Coca-Cola and the fact that there is caffeine in there, I'm like, I don't think that's good for that child
No,
to be consuming caffeine.
It's very much
like,
not.
It's really not good. I mean, it's bad enough that we do it as adults, but yeah. Anyways, but in the backlash of like trying to have, they should have more health drinks and this, that, they get in on the water market and create Dasani. That does backlash because I think it was in the UK, I read that they were just filling the bottles with tap water, and they're like, they're selling us tap water. And then they were like, no, we treat it. It's like we put it through a filter system. That led to a whole batch being highly contaminated, and they were adding shit that was like really bad. So then that got recalled and was like a huge problem. There was a huge land waste problem. I think India was like the top one, that they were like fucking up their land because of the waste that they were dumping off from their plants and their products, that it was like screwing up the agriculture. And that wasn't just India. There was a couple countries. Like there was tons of problems with this. They're contaminating. There was a whole batch at a phase that they had to recall a bunch of Coca-Cola bottles themselves because they were contaminated. Like a couple kids died. All of that, all of Nazi shit. And their biggest backlash ever in the press was when they changed the taste to their new Coke.
Yeah, New
And
Coke
that
was like the
New
biggest
Coke.
PR nightmare that they've ever had to deal
Huge.
with.
And the reason that they made quote unquote new Coke, yeah, it's the only thing that they've ever gotten shit for. And it's insane. You like read all this stuff and you're like, and the only problem is that new Coke sucks. And they did that because in comes Pepsi. Pepsi got started the early 1900s as well. And they were Pepsi Cola. They offered Coke like so many times a deal to buy them. At one point in 1933, they were offered a deal to buy Pepsi for $50,000 and they turned it down. So they constantly would turn down offers to buy out Pepsi. And Coke sued Pepsi for using the word cola in their ads. They're a ripoff of us, backfired. Pepsi countersued them for trying to gain a monopoly on cola. And then that is when cola gets deemed a public term and just a reference of like what it is instead of Coca-Cola being able to have that. Then they go into a forever marketing battle, and it's just up and down. At one point, they both start like cutting their prices and adding like, you get a free one, you do this. And they're just cutting the market so much that it was hurting both of them. And they realized, okay, this is dumb. So there's...
Oh, yeah. I remember as a kid in like the late 80s, early 90s even, you could get like what was essentially a liter of Pepsi for like $1.50. Like the price on soda was so low at a certain point. I remember that.
Well, and that was even like in the early 70s they were doing this shit and this, that. There's speculation that they had maybe cut a secret deal behind doors. It's not for sure. We don't know if they were like, let's stop this price. Like, I raise my price, you raise your price because this fucking is dumb. And Pepsi in 1975 gets the idea that they're not going to compete on marketing, but they're like, we'll just compete on taste. And so they launched the Pepsi Challenge, which went on for quite a long time. I think even into the 90s, I remember the Pepsi Challenge. And they would go around and do blind taste tests, 2 white cups, Coca-Cola in one, Pepsi in the other. And it always showed that Pepsi was preferred. Even if not much higher, they always won out on taste. So they started pumping that into their ads. They started doing the classic, like their commercials were the videos of people being like, I like this one better. Oh, what? It's Pepsi? Oh my God, I can't believe I chose that one. Like, dude, I don't know why we're in Britain again.
Yeah, that was an interesting voice choice on that one, Gelsey.
It was a little bit like Muppety. Like,
Yeah, those improv classes are paying off themselves.
I've not been in an improv class since I was a teenager. I just want to solidify I am not that girl. I am not playing improv games on my Friday night. No, I am drinking wine and doing lines of Coke alone in my apartment on Friday night. Anyways, so to compete with that, Coke was like, oh, fuck, people prefer Pepsi. Well, let's compete. We're going to create a new formula. And they thought it would be like the thing. And that's when New Coke comes out. Huge backlash. I mean, people were like protesting. They were getting letters and letters and letters and calls and calls and calls every day about angry customers. And most of these people hadn't even tried New Coke. And I think one of the CEOs or someone was like, we could have just created God's elixir and people still wouldn't care. They wouldn't try it. It's the concept of how could you take away our Coke and this, that. So they turn it back and then they release, that's when Classic Coke comes out. They release Classic Coke, sales rise. It's a huge success. Everyone's like, thank you for our Coke back. There again was some people going, was this all a planned stunt that they went back? It wasn't. And Coke was like, no, they actually really thought this new Coke would work. But it actually helped them in the long run with sales with the Classic Coke. That's about where I go because, then, like I said, we're getting to the 80s and 90s. Obviously, we've all seen our fair share of Coke's journey. We have Classic Coke, then we, Diet Coke comes in, now Coke Zero, which I listened to a really interesting podcast like a month or so ago about diet culture, coming back to our diet conversation, but the verbiage on how things are sold, how like diet used to be the thing. And I remember as a kid growing up, it was like everyone was on a diet. I mean, I feel like that was from like the 70s through the 90s. It was like,
but now it's something like Coke Zero,
or
like
and so
Bud
the
Light
word
or
diet, diet doesn't do as well anymore. They've done it in test groups, this, that, because it has a negative connotation of like, oh, a diet is bad. Now we're health conscious, and so zero is implicating more like, oh, sans sugar because sugar's bad, so this doesn't have sugar, instead of going, oh, it's diet, and now everyone's like, oh, diet's bad because the chemicals and this, that. Literally, Coke Zero is the same fucking thing as Diet Coke. Like, they just rebranded and they're selling the same thing and everyone's buying it, and it's hilarious to me. It's fucking marketing is so skeezy, but like it's so genius. Like sometimes I read some of these marketing stunts and this, that, and I'm like, that's fucking brilliant. Like, oh my God, I think I would in another life like love to be in marketing and be that person that like works late nights in the office and just like kills it and comes up with these like genius plans, and I'm like, we will do this big stunt, and like, I mean, what a terrible life. I don't want to be doing that, but I don't know, I think I'd be really good at marketing.
I think so too. And
it's a show.
And we're going to talk about a little bit more of the 80s and 90s soda marketing after this quick commercial break.
The Love Affair event is on at Whole Foods Market with deals on delicious desires through February 14th. The floral department's in full bloom, so look for savings on double dozen bunches of roses. In the meat and seafood departments, save on animal welfare certified New York strip steaks and sustainable wild-caught lobster tails to make the night sizzle. Gifts from the wellness and beauty department are always a nice touch. And you have to grab those chocolate-dipped strawberries. Make Whole Foods Market your Valentine's Day destination.
TIAA is on a mission. Why? Because 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So in collaboration with big-name artists like Wyclef Jean, TIAA released Paper Right, new music inspiring a new financial future. With 100% of streaming sales going to a nonprofit that teaches students how to invest. Stream Paper Right now and help close the gap.
91 Donkey Lane is a magical apartment complex that contains immense power but lacks intelligent inhabitants.
What is happening?
I'm getting texts.
Why are we getting a lot of texts?
People found out what we did.
Oh, dividing Mike Myers into an infinite amount of tiny Mike Myers?
Listen to 91 Donkey Lane for free on Spotify or your favorite podcasting app. More at 91donkeylane.com. See you there, you donkeys.
I know you have like a whole thing, you already have it prepped, but I was thinking this earlier in my research, and I'm just laughing because when I think about Fanta, speaking of marketing, all you think about, I say Fanta and everyone goes, Fanta, Fanta, don't you want the Fanta, don't. I always thought it was like a Latin American based drink, or it has this really spicy Latin like, ooh, this weather's really hot. Grab a Fanta, make it stop. That's like, and that's a fucking Nazi drink.
I love how advertising has affected you as a person, because I still to this day, like, I laughed out loud this week listening to our Jump Blues episode when you're just like, and I knew that song as the Chips Ahoy song. Because,
marketing in the 90s was on fucking point. Like,
it was on point, and that's a perfect lead-in to what I was going to ask you.
All right.
Look, I know that both of us started this episode essentially talking about how we've pretty much ripped soda out of our diet, or at least regulated it to like very specific circumstances. But Pepsi challenge. You've got a bottle of Coke in the fridge, bottle of Pepsi in the fridge. Which one are you grabbing?
My gut instinct, I think, is to say Coke, but as a kid, it was Pepsi. I grew up on Pepsi. My mom, like, was a Pepsi-holic, Diet Pepsi. Like, there was never a moment where there was not Diet Pepsi in my fridge. And so I grew up on Diet Pepsi. And then Britney Spears was like spokesperson for Pepsi, and I was the perfect age to be like, I love Britney. Remember those?
Well, there was also, do you remember? So my pick is Pepsi as well. I think that Pepsi did a great job of advertising it just for the kids. They really, and also just, I'm going to say it, the Pepsi can is cool looking.
It
like
is.
That blue, like it's a cool looking can. But you know what? As
I've gotten older and I start, like, more people have Diet Coke or Coke, because that's just more generally, like, when I'm at Disneyland with friends, I'm like, oh my God, and someone will get a Diet Coke. I'm like, that sounds fucking good. Like, it's been like in the last year that I find myself having a Coke more than I ever did before. And I'm quite I'm like, fuck, this is fun. And I think it's just like the years of like dieting so hard. Now I'm like eating these things that I'm like, I like this. And it's still very rare that I'll have a Coke, but
same. I almost exclusively only drink soda during the week of San Diego Comic-Con. Like, just because I'm running around so much, it's like, you know what, I need any sugar assistant I can get to keep me going.
It's even when I like drink, I used to, so when I first started drinking as a teenager, not like I was like heavily drinking, but out, my go-to was rum and Coke, and that's only because the Andrews Sisters song Rum and Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Which is a perfect example of how celebrities brought in, I mean, the Andrews Sisters, this is 1940s World War II, and they're singing a song, drinking rum and Coca-Cola. I'm brilliant. That's advertising.
Yeah.
But
no, 100%. Well, that's what I was going to say is I remember, you mentioned Britney Spears. I remember the Spice Girls doing the Generation Next song.
Oh my God, that's right.
Yeah, Generation Next, Generation. And it was just the Spice Girls drinking Pepsis.
Didn't Michael Jackson have a Pepsi commercial?
I think so. I think that's where his hair caught on fire, right?
What?
Was filming a Pepsi commercial.
Wait.
Have you never seen this footage?
No.
So Michael Jackson was filming a commercial for one of them. It was Pepsi or Coke. I want to say it was Pepsi. And his hair caught on fire from because it was him doing a live show and there was all these like fireworks going off. And you can literally watch the video because his hair catches on fire and he just does a spin and puts his hair out through the sheer force of his body spinning fast enough. Yeah. I have never done the full deep dive research, but I am under the understanding that moment is what triggered his obsession with plastic surgery, because he got burns and they gave him a skin graft, and then that was like
weird, crazy. It was a trip though in that video, seeing everyone. Obviously, it's a Pepsi commercial, so all the crowd is holding like the Pepsi cups, and I haven't seen one of those. It was such a trip. Remember the old school, like, you get them at the movies and the Pepsi cups? Like, you don't see those anymore. That was fun. But
advertising works, Gelsey.
Generally, you said, though, Pepsi versus Coke. Growing up, I said we always had Diet Pepsi. We had something else, though, and it was always Sprite. So I was never a dark cola fan. If I had soda, it was hands down going to be a Sprite, orange soda. When Sierra Mist came out, that was my jam. Like, I liked all the lighter flavors, and I still do. And now I was going to say drinking, obviously rum and Coke that was a small phase. It was more of the novelty. But as I got older, I am a whiskey drinker. So whiskey gingers, like, I love ginger and I love ginger ale. That's probably going to be like one of the only sodas I'll go for. And nothing beats a whiskey ginger.
Well, if somebody's listening and they want to hear even more histories of some of their favorite beverages, where can they go to let us know?
Yeah, please let us know on Instagram. You can find us at BeforeMyTime_podcast, or on Facebook. Just search Before My Time. We will pop up right on our wall. DM us, write a comment on our latest post, and be like, yo, I want to know all about tea or bourbon or coffee. That's about where my expertise goes. I think that's all I learned. But anyways, or just let us know what your favorite soda is. What's your favorite Coca-Cola advert? Are you anti-soda? Are you anti-Nazi Germany? Let us know. Thanks so much for listening. If you do have a second, we would love if you gave us a review. It helps us get in front of more listeners like yourself. We'll see you next time. Ciao.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.